Dr. Zogby, you see those votes and you don't see that as a corrupting influence of the Democratic Party?
Of course I do. This has been my life. We got done in this time. We're not going to get done in next time. There will be a debate on dark money the next time.
The Democratic Party's fidelity to dark money as a way to control the party and undermine the Democratic progressive interests of its voter base is extremely disturbing.
We're going to come back and fight another day. I've been doing this a long time.
What do you think would have happened if he or some other candidate just chose to do the dirty break?
We would have had Donald Trump as president.
Is it worth it to have a dirty break, even if it means that candidate doesn't win, but sows the seeds for a third party that has the possibility of winning within the next 10 or 20 years?
I've been fighting with the Catholic Church to reform. I've been fighting the Democratic Party. I've been fighting Israel-Palestine.
All right, I'm very thrilled to be joined today on Bad Faith Podcast by Dr. James Zogby, who's the founder and president of the Arab American Institute, and has been a member of the executive committee of the Democratic National Committee. And that's why we're here to talk today, what to talk about today, Dr. Zogby. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
So few on the left at this point are unaware of the story about which you wrote an article in The Nation just today about the fact that the DNC moved to block debate on dark money. And you are leading the cause to actually get dark money out of the Democratic Party machine. Tell us exactly what your role was and how this happened.
Well, I could give you the long version or the long version. I'll start with the long version. The long version is just on the resolution on dark money. We came to the conclusion after this year's primaries, and we saw the role that dark money was playing. It started with Bernie in the 2020 race, where the ads in Iowa were, I think, really damaging to the campaign. He's too old. He's a socialist. He's going to cost us down ballot tickets. I mean, people say that it was South Carolina that cost Bernie the victory. I don't. I think it was the negative ads and the way that the party establishment and MSNBC and some of the networks echoed that theme then for the next 2 weeks after he started winning to tarnish the campaign and make it look like it was a losing proposition. They did it then with Nina Turner in her special election. And then this year, there were several races. Most disturbing to me was Summer Lee, the way that they ganged up on her, and Donna Edwards here, and Rashida, of course, we expected that she'd get it. Cori Bush got it. Andy Levin was a very disturbing case because here's somebody who, member of Congress, comes from a legacy family of really good people. And it was pro-Israel groups that ganged up on him to beat him because he wasn't pro-Israel enough for them. And the amounts that were spent were astronomical. I mean, $6 million in the Donna Edwards race and more than $4 million in the Summer Lee. I mean, overall, more than 30 million that we've counted of just this. And there was more because there was Jessica Cisneros and other races, Nita Alam in North Carolina. There were others as well. And so we decided that we'd bring a resolution saying that no dark money in Democratic primaries. Now, I know the Democratic Party relies on dark money in its general elections, right? And when you say dark money, people say, oh, what are you talking about? I got accused of anti-Semitism for that. And I said, no, dark money is a term after McCain-Feingold and after Citizens United. It was money that is not reportable. And money that's not reportable is called dark. And we saw Democrats for the first time using it in massive ways to defeat progressives. That was the common theme. Now, in earlier elections, you will recall that the DCCC would pick a favorite in a race. You know, they would want the moderate to beat the progressive, and they'd come into a primary. They didn't do it this year. They stayed out of it because the dark money groups did it for them. They ganged up on the progressives. And so we said we want to do a resolution, no dark money in primaries. Democrats should decide for themselves, not have billionaires, many of them Republicans or fossil fuel or finance houses or whatever, pouring money into this effort to defeat people. If you surrender the role of decision-making to them, we don't have a party anymore. And I'm not sure we have one anyway sometimes. I mean, what we have is big money luring people this way or that way, and no structure to control or regulate that. So we said, we've got to do that. We got to control it. When we brought it to the DNC with about 35 endorsers, DNC members, we thought we'd have a debate. I thought we'd probably lose. I was chair of the resolutions committee for a decade. I know how it works. I know that the dark money, the kind of the deep state, the party staff and the consulting groups will get together and say, we don't want this resolution, we don't want that. And then they'll whip members to vote a certain way. I thought at least we'd have a debate and we'd lose. What I never expected was after we presented the resolution, Judith Whitmer Judith made the presentation, there wasn't even a vote. They said, does anybody want to put this on the floor for a vote? Dead silence. The chair said, okay, next resolution, and went on to and I was like stunned. I got up and I said, you cannot do that. I mean, what happened to Summer Lee should never happen to another Democrat. What happened to Andy Levin should never happen again. Why is there not even a vote? People wouldn't look at me. I mean, these are people I've served. I've been on the DNC for 30 years. I know these people. I've fought battles on the same side as them. That they wouldn't look me in the eye made me sort of feel like, like Comrade Trotsky or something, like I became a non-person because now I'm on the other side. It was deeply troubling, Briahna.
So, Dr. Zogby, help me understand, because I confess that I'm relatively new to politics, generally speaking, and the kind of organizational structure of the DNC is still rather opaque to me. So can you help me understand, who is on this resolutions committee, the kinds of people that were unable to look you in the eye? Who are they? How did they get there? And what kind of accountability mechanisms exist for those who are very frustrated to hear about how this all happens?
The problem is there's no accountability and there's no transparency, and it is opaque. So if you say it's all opaque, guess what? You get it just completely right. That's the way it is. Now the long story. I got on the DNC the hard way. In '88, Jackson at the Democratic Convention was given 8 slots to fill. And he asked me to be one of them. And I said, fine, that's great. I had a period of 4 years before then where we'd formed Arab American Democratic clubs. We tried to get into the party. They would not meet with us. They would not talk to us. They would not recognize us. And so when Jesse said, I want you to be on the DNC, I said, great. A day later, I got approached by somebody who said, we think it's a good idea for you not to accept that, because if you do, Republicans and some of the major Jewish organizations are going to come after Dukakis, saying he's soft on Palestine and he's got this pro-PLO guy on the DNC, blah, blah, blah. I said, okay. I mean, what am I going to do when the party leaders come to you and do that? It's like, it wasn't worth that much to me. I was mad about it, heard about it. Ron Brown.
Just so I understand, by virtue of working on Jesse Jackson's campaign and being a senior advisor, he, as a candidate, got 8 slots, an opportunity to have a slot, just one slot.
Right, 8 slots.
8 slots. Okay, I'm sorry.
So okay, I was to be one, and I stepped aside, and we picked instead a young Palestinian American woman from Texas. And sure enough, full page ads in the New York Times. Look who's on the DNC. I mean, they went after her with a vengeance, even though she was just a very sweet young woman. Anyway, so Ron Brown told me at the time, he said, I'll make it up to you. And when he became chair of the DNC, he did. In 1992, right before he left, he appointed me to the DNC. So that's how I got on. Number of people are appointed. About 75 for diversity. That's what it's supposed to be there for. And I was there clearly as a diversity. I was the only Arab American on the DNC. Then later I got put on the executive committee, the only Arab American ever on the executive committee. I chaired the resolutions committee because I was the only Arab American there. In 2016, after the Bernie campaign, and I got put on the Unity Reform Commission, the only Arab American got dumped from the DNC, from the executive committee, because I said there has to be financial transparency and accountability because there is none.
Still in 2020, you were the only Arab American at the DNC.
Yes.
Wow.
And I got dumped then too. The White House, whoever it was who made the decision when they do the at-large appointments, I got dropped. And I got back on because I chaired the Ethnic Council and they elected me to fill the slot representing the Ethnic Council.
On the executive committee.
Yeah, on the DNC period.
On the DNC period. So help me understand this then. How large is the DNC and what other ways are there to get on it? Is it just that the chair of the DNC
on the DNC
appoints?
are elected in their states.
Okay.
There's national committee people from the different states. The number of national committee people, it depends on the population of the number of Democrats. Overall, there's 400 and something members. There are 75 at-large appointees by the chair.
Okay.
They should also be elected, but they're not. They're appointed by the chair. And the reason why it's a problem is because those 75 then populate the executive committee, the rules and bylaws committee, the resolutions committee, and the credentials committee. So most of the people on the committees are people appointed by the chair in the first place. And so they're loyal, and their sense is, if I don't vote the right way, I'm never going to get on this again, right? And it's never bothered me. I mean, if you want to knock me off, knock me off. I won't go down quietly, but they tried to do it in 2020. Therefore, when people are whipped and said, don't vote for this resolution, they're like, oh my God, if I go against them, I probably will never get back on this again. The point is that not only is there no transparency and accountability in terms of decision making, because those 75 appointees literally dominate the executive committee and the rules committee and the resolutions committee. There also is no transparency in terms of how the organization runs. Reason why I got knocked off the executive committee when I was on Bernie's Unity and Reform Commission was I said that we should fulfill the regulation and the bylaws that says the DNC should annually review the budget and the effectiveness of the budget and expenditures and staff. I was on the DNC at that point for almost 30 years. Never once have I seen the budget. Never once have we said this was an effective expenditure, that wasn't. Never once have we been asked to look at staff and say these people are doing the job they should do or not do. And so there's no governing body in the DNC. The governing body in the DNC are hired staff who are largely come from the consultant class, who make all the decisions, and the elected members, the national committee people from the different states, et cetera, have literally no say in the running of the organization. So I sometimes joke that we're props who go to meetings, and I'm a Catholic, so I can say this, right? We go to meetings and we're told when to stand up, when to sit down, when to clap, when to cheer. But making decisions that govern the way the party operates. When I first got on Bernie's Unity, when I was first one of his appointees, I went to Rob Stein, who was a very good friend of mine, who served as chief of staff under Ron Brown back in the late 80s, early 90s. And I said, Rob, I'm on the Unity Reform Commission. What are the reforms that you would suggest? He said, there is no party. He said, the one thing I learned when I was there is that there's no governing body. The governing body is supposed to be the membership, but they're not. And so, frankly, what you have to do if you want to create a governing body is start from scratch. And so I tried to create an elected financial oversight committee. Completely, there was like, what are you talking about? I tried to create an elected ombudsman committee. If you recall, in the 2016 election, there were financial shenanigans with the way Hillary and Donna Brazil wrote the book.
Of course.
I said, we should never have this happen again. We should have an elected ombudsman who, if we know that there's a problem, we can go to the ombudsman and resolve it. Why should we wait for a book to come out or a newspaper article to come out? That got scratched. In terms of now the ombudsman committee is appointed by the chair. I mean, how can you how can you have an ombudsman committee that's supposed to decide whether or not the bylaws are being informed, being honored, and have it be appointed by the chair? Now, Jamie Harrison's a great guy, but it's not about the person in that position then. It's about the Debbie Wasserman Schultz. It's about previous chairs. It's about future chairs. It's about creating a structure that is accountable and transparent and democratic. And frankly, right now, it's not.
Well,
and neither is the Republican Party for that reason, for that matter. But
well, for sure. But Dr. Zogby, this is part of the issue. People, I'm sure you're aware, have been wrestling with this question of whether or not, given all of the obstacles that you're describing within the DNC, whether or not a candidate like Bernie Sanders or Jesse Jackson ever stands a chance of having a fair shot as running as a Democrat. And while I appreciate that someone like Jamie Harrison may not be as bad as some alternative, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, let's say, at the end of the day, I wonder what you make of the fact that you proposed a resolution, which I think the lay American of either political party would see as common sense in the direction we want the country to go in, which is getting dark money out of politics. This is an issue that once animated Republicans. John McCain famously was to the left of Barack Obama ultimately when it came to this issue in the general election in 2008. How is it that something like that happens? And as you describe in this Nation article, you're met with complete and total silence and people not making eye contact with you, people that you've known for years, over what, again, should be a common sense issue. And correct me if I'm wrong, what has the response been like from Jamie Harrison? What has the response been like from the very Congress members who this kind of a resolution is designed to protect? The people like Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar faced a tough race, and Nina Turner faced a tough race, obviously Summerlee. Has there been support from progressive flanks highlighting the corruption within the DNC and how this issue has exposed what many people on the left have been saying for a long time?
The answer is yes, there's been support, and here is the issue. We will have a winter meeting. We'll go back to the winter meeting. We will have more members of Congress supporting this plank. We will have more DNC members supporting it. We will make sure that we have at least one person on the resolutions committee who will put it on the table. We will make sure that all of our ducks are in a row because we know now how the game is going to be played. And they're not going to get away with it the next time. They took us by surprise. We thought in good faith, they'd put it on the floor, we'd have a debate. We'd lose, but we'd have a debate. We never expected this. It will not happen again. And here's why. Look, as I said, I've been on the DNC for a long time. I was a lonely voice for a lot of years. When Bernie ran, our numbers of DNC members who were progressive swelled enormously and continue to grow as young activists are being elected in different states around the country.
But Dr. Zogby, are any of those people making it onto the executive committee and to the committees that actually have power, as you described?
Some of them are, because some of the slots are reserved for state chairs, and we've got state chairs, some great ones, state of Washington, state of Nebraska, state of Colorado. We've got some good people. Bernie didn't do this for nothing, and the party is going to change. Look, it's a long haul fight. It's never a short fight. Mao, taught some lessons about how you fight with somebody stronger than you. You don't go into a head-on conflict because you're going to lose. Instead, you find the weak points and you go for them, and you continue to come back again to fight another day. We're going to come back and fight another day. I've been doing this a long time. Look, in my life, and I'm an old guy now, I have fought fights with the Democratic Party, the Catholic Church, and Israel, and they are very tough opponents. Not winning, but when you see something like this dark money thing, what am I going to do? Just walk away from it? No.
Well, no,
I'm going to fight it and win.
I don't think anyone's hoping that you walk away from it, but help me understand what you think, what the plan is for things to go differently next time. Is there someone on the committee
instead of 35 endorsers, we'll get 100 endorsers. Instead of having Bernie and Andy Levin and Pramila J. Paul come out and do a tweet about it, we'll get a letter from members of Congress, Democrats, and from the Progressive
But Dr.
Caucus
Zogby, is there someone on the committee who you think will commit at the next bite of the apple to actually voting to have a debate on it?
We will make sure that we find somebody. There were a couple of people who surprised me when they didn't do this. They won't surprise me next time, because we'll make sure that we talk to them. And they were all new on the committee too. The people that we were counting on were new, and I don't think they knew what the game was. But now we know what the game is, and we're not gonna walk away from this fight.
So you're saying that you spoke to some members of the committee about their failure to bring this issue to a debate, and they've said that that they were caught off guard or perhaps intimidated or whatever, and next time around they're prepared to make the case, even though it might cause them to lose their spot on the committee in the way that you were kind of chastised or punished.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think we'll do it. I think we'll do it. We may not win it, but we will get a debate on it. We'll get a debate on it. I'm confident that we will, because and they won't be able to use don't do this because the midterm is only 60 days away and you don't want to have a whatever. When we have the winter meeting, there won't be a midterm in the. There's always some reason not to have the debate. There is no reason not to have the debate. We're going to have the debate, and it'll be at the winter meeting. Oh, by the way, Briahna, it'll be not only in the winter meeting, but it'll be in every podcast, progressive journal, progressive work, and between now and the winter meeting. So that's why I'm so happy to do this program with you, because we want to continue to build support and keep this issue alive. What happened to Summer Lee should never happen again.
Well, okay, so here's the issue. In midterms, I imagine that many progressives are going to be facing the same kind of dark money campaigns that Summer Lee and Andy Levin and Nina Turner and all the rest faced. And so I understand the DNC's interest in punting this conversation until after midterms, not just because the discussion of the Democratic Party clinging to dark money is a bad look for the Democratic Party, but because, as you set out so clearly in the beginning, the Democratic Party is relying on this particular mechanism to keep progressives out of office, whereas before they would say, well, we just support the incumbent. And it's nothing personal about progressives. We support the incumbent. And the incumbent was always a moderate, conservative, corporate Dem. Or they might say alternatively, back in 2018, you remember there were the bans for vendors, against vendors that deigned to supply services for insurgent left candidates. Okay, that was one theory. Then sometimes they would say, we're going to back the diverse candidate, right? That was an argument that used to be able to be made before all of these insurgent leftists were women of color, and we saw what happened to Jessica Cisneros. Now they're all out of those options, so they simply say we're going to be hands off, but they rely on these dark money efforts. Given that's the posture currently, it does seem like punting this conversation basically leaves all of the progressives that are running in the midterms high and dry, no?
No, because these primaries are done now, right? I mean, we're past the primary phase, and we're now into the general. And the party, our resolution didn't speak to generals. There ought to be
Fair
no
enough.
dark money in politics, period. But we figured that at this point, what concerned us most were Dem on Dem races where the progressive was targeted by the dark money groups, and that's what we want to avoid. And we're going to see this again in 2020, in 2024. We'll see it again in 2026. But the point now is that we just got to continue to call it out and dirty the dark money so that the candidate that takes it looks bad for doing it. You can't stand by when Nina Turner is being slandered, being slammed, having her reputation tarnished by constant ads, making her out to be some monster that she's not. You can't stand by and let that happen and say, oh, I didn't have anything to do with it. You can call it out. If you're her opponent, you call it out and say, that's wrong. This is not Nina Turner. Same thing happened to Chantel. Same thing happened to Jamal Bowman. Same thing happened to Cori Bush. If that's happening in a race, the Democrat running against them has to be able to say, has to be forced to say, this is dirty. It should not happen. Stop it.
Well, then
And they haven't been doing it.
I'm curious what you make of the fact that in Senator Turner's race, the Progressive Caucus ultimately not only sat out, but they did endorse Shontel Brown. At that point, deciding, of course, we're going to back an incumbent. And Pramila Jayapal, and even Senator Turner's close allies like Cori Bush didn't weigh in on that.
I'd say distraught about that. I was. At that point, Shontel was in Congress, and I guess they thought they should support her. I mean, I'm not going to make excuses for them, but I figure that would be the logical reason why they did it. But it wasn't a blunder. It was an embarrassment, and it was the wrong thing for them to do. It was the wrong thing for them to do. And I'm talking about the 2021 race where Nina started, 40 points in the lead, right, and they pummeled her. This race, the 2022 one, the deck was stacked already against Nina. She was running against an incumbent. Her reputation had already been damaged by these the negative ads that had happened just 3 months earlier.
Right. And yet Senator Turner won the same day votes. And there's an argument about the effect of ads, the flyers and negative ads coming at the same time with the early voting ballot, and that she was frankly able to make up that ground, which I think says something about the resilience and her popularity in the state that I think a lot of people minimize because she lost twice. But to me, the lesson of Senator Turner's race really is about the pernicious influence of dark money, which is why it is so frustrating that in this moment, it feels like this is the kind of story that online progressives are very upset about, that the nation will talk about. But Democrats as a whole are still kind of safely in a cocoon of belief that their party apparatus is working toward democracy and justice and fairness. And at a time when Democrats are trying to make the national case that you have to vote for Democrats to protect our quote unquote democracy, the Democratic Party's fidelity to dark money as a way to control the party and undermine the democratic progressive interests of its voter base is extremely disturbing.
It is very, very much so. And it's a blunder. I mean, one of Jesse Jackson's famous lines from the '88 speech was, "It takes two wings to fly." And it was about the right and the left, the progressives and the moderates in the party. And that's still true too here now. Their all-out effort to demolish progressives ultimately is going to cost Democrats victories. Turn enough people away, frustrate enough people, give them the sense that there's no place for me in this party, we start losing elections. And we can't afford to lose elections because even though the bumper sticker, some might say the bumper sticker for Democrats could be, vote for us, we're not as bad as the other guys, which is not a hell of a selling pitch. Even if that's the case, what the other guys represent right now is a true danger to democracy. It represents a true danger to rights all across the board. It represents a true danger to the world. And we can't afford to lose this election. We need to pick up Senate seats and not let Mitch McConnell become the majority leader. We've got to protect what we've got in the House. We just can't lose the election. And so they're counting on that. But if they're counting on that, and that's why they think we'll all just get in line, I'll get in line. But there's a whole lot of young people and a whole lot of turned off people who are going to say, I don't give a damn about this anymore. Why should I care when great people get demolished and big money ads come, that the party cannot allow that to continue. And they don't see that it's in the interests of democracy, it's in the interests of the party, it's in the interests of the country to make sure that this kind of campaigning doesn't happen.
Dr. Zogby, how do you think they can be made to see, but for the outcome of actually losing elections? And
we've been losing elections and they still don't get it, Briahna. They still don't get. There was another resolution that had the same fate. at this meeting. Look, I write about this in the Nation article. The last time this happened to me, when I had a resolution that got no, was 2003, February. I brought a resolution to the party. I was on the resolutions committee at the time that we should oppose the Iraq War. I said, we don't know the costs, consequences, or terms of engagement, and we should not send our young men and women into a battle of such consequence. And Jesse Jackson Jr. and I submitted it. Every hatchet man from the party leadership descended on me that day. Please don't do this. Please don't do this. We don't want you to do it. We don't want to talk about this. We need to stand with the president. We don't want to look weak on foreign policy. And I was like, this isn't about being weak on foreign policy. It's about being stupid on foreign policy. You don't agree to a war under these terms. And they wouldn't let me do it. I insisted on doing it. They let me speak and introduce it. But then they ruled immediately out of order any second of the resolution, and so it died. And they were wrong then, and they're wrong now. And it took, 5 years for Democrats to realize how stupid and wrong they were about the war? I hope it takes less time for them to realize how stupid and wrong they are about dark money. These are decisions that they make that they think are smart, but they are dumb and have consequences. And this one has consequences. And look, it's not like I said, it's not like we're winning elections with them. We've been losing. I mean, we lost control of legislatures in Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin, states that were blue. And the consequences to labor, to women, to students, to workers and health and safety regulations and jobs lost, enormous consequence. And I don't think the party establishment cares. I don't think they even see it.
Dr. Zogby, I'd be the first one to say that the Democrats have been very disrespectful to the progressive movement, have offered it as at best crumbs, has celebrated environmental wins that at their best set us up for climate catastrophe, and on and on and on down the line. However, some people have argued, and I might agree with them on the margins, that but for the losses that you describe, and but for the power that was demonstrated by the Bernie Sanders races, and but for the risks that people are ready and willing to defect from the Democratic Party altogether, and which they're doing, by the way, in record numbers according to polls this year, that we wouldn't have gotten even those marginal climate wins, that we would not have gotten Biden's commitment to canceling $10,000 of student debt, as meager as that is, and as likely as it is to come to some pretty serious legal challenges down the road, as we talked about in the last episode of Bad Faith. That but for some people's demonstrated unwillingness to continue to vote for a corrupt Democratic Party, we wouldn't even have gotten that. And if people did continue to fall in line and vote blue no matter who, we'd be even worse off than we are today. I mean, what do you make of that?
Well, first of all, if given the choice between a really crappy blue and red, I'll always go with the crappy blue. I'm in that camp. I am. So criticize me if you will, but I will never forget Julian Bond in 1968. He was the hero because he was the one guy at that level who crossed over from civil rights to anti-war. He was a leader in both at the convention. And so he led the credentials fight for the Georgia delegation. They won a compromise. He then shifted to the platform and argued for the anti-war resolution. And if you recall, or the stories about how the police came in and beat up the demonstrators on the floor, the delegates, the DNC, the Democratic Convention delegates who were chanting against the war. And then on the night when the vice presidential nominee was to be considered, the party had their nominee, and the progressives put up Julian Bond's name. He was too young to be vice president. I wasn't 35 yet. And there were chants, Julian Bond, and of course he lost. And then when Humphrey and and Muskie came out on the floor on the convention that night for the balloons. Out from behind the back of the stage comes Julian Bond and holds up both of their hands. Well, I got to see Julian a couple of years later, and I said to him, "Why'd you do that? You broke our hearts." You know, I mean, it was like we were counting on you to hold the banner. And he said to me, he said, "There's two kinds of people. There are those who say it's got to get worse before it gets better. And there are those who say, I got to make it a little bit better all the time." He said, "I am not one of those who's going to sit up on my little pinnacle and look down at the muck of the world and do nothing about it." He said, at that point, the contest was no longer Julian Bond versus Hubert Humphrey. The fight was Hubert Humphrey versus Richard Nixon. There was only one choice to make. I had to be with the candidate. And that's the way I felt about Hillary. I mean, I had many stories about my we didn't get along, whatever. But when it was Hillary Clinton versus Donald Trump, no question at all where you had to be. And so, yeah, I know that's what I want. Is I want the party establishment to know that if they keep doing that to us, it becomes more difficult. If I have to tell that Julian Bond story one more time, right? People are going to say, "I've heard that before. I don't care anymore." And that's what's happening right now, Briahna.
I think that's already
You're
a
right.
done deal, Dr. Zogby.
Right. And the burden is on them. It's not on us. The burden is on them. After what they did to Bernie Sanders in 2020, the burden is on them to make it better. And they have not done it, and they're making it worse. Ganging up on progressives this year and doing what they did to Summer Lee, doing what they did to Nina Turner, doing what they did to Jamel Bo, this was shameful and wrong. But the best answer is not to quit, because if we quit, we give them exactly what they want. The worst thing that they fear is that we stick around and fight.
Dr. Zogby, I don't pretend to speak for anybody, but if one thing has been made clear by my audience and clear to me directly from my audience, and because I'm able to talk to them directly during these call-in episodes that I have, when they call in and talk to me after the shows, is that they really resent the idea that choosing an alternative to voting for the Democratic Party is repeatedly characterized as them giving up, not caring, not having responsibility for the world that they live in, not caring about vulnerable communities. They are the vulnerable communities. I have people that regularly call in to my call-in show from their shift as EMTs, from their shift as food delivery drivers, from their truck beds, from all walks of life. And they are the people who gave what to them is often an hour's worth of salary times 3 to make the $27 donation to give to the Bernie Sanders campaign and keep it afloat. And what they are saying is not that they want to give up or check out of politics. What they resent is the idea that there is a binary choice of voting for the Democratic Party and keeping this institution, which you've described here today as, I'm sorry, I will use the word corrupt, even if you may choose to use a different word, but unbelievably corrupt and unwilling to stand up for even the most basic of principles within the Democratic Party's own stated goals to have dark money out of politics. And what they're saying is, I want alternative options. And for them, that means either doing mutual aid or spending their time, effort, and resources investing in third parties. And so I want to ask you, after seeing what Jesse Jackson went through, and after seeing what Bernie went through twice, and now after seeing what they've done to any number of progressive candidates over the past year, what do you think would have happened if Bernie Sanders had, in 2020, chosen instead to defect and run as a third party at the point at which it became clear that he wasn't going to get a fair shot, per your description at the top of this episode, with MSNBC and the rest allying against him after he won those first few states? What do you think would have happened if he or some other candidate just chose to do the dirty break?
We would have had Donald Trump as president, and I think the consequences of that are too great. And the fact is, you're right, that the party establishment continues to, they know that that's there, and they hold that over our heads. But the reality is that that is the situation, and that is a risk I am unwilling to take. And I think it should be a risk that all of us are unwilling to take. The consequences are real. There is a choice. It was not Julian Bond versus Hubert Humphrey. It was Hubert Humphrey versus Richard Nixon. If Al Gore had been president in 2000, we would not have had an Iraq war. If Donald Trump had not been elected in 2016, think of the difference. I mean, look, Hillary Clinton was not my cup of tea. I was a Bernie person. I was a Jesse Jackson person in 84 and 88. I know we would have been in a better place had they won. They didn't win. But having the Democrat instead of the Republican made a difference, maybe in small ways, but even though the change, the positive change might have been incremental, the negative change, had Donald Trump won in 2020, would have been so consequential that we would not want to be around for it. And frankly, that is not a risk worth taking. And I think all of us have to look for real at the options available to us. And that makes me convinced that I have to fight. I have to continue to fight to change the damn
everybody's
thing. Everybody's fighting. I'm not willing to let it go. I know.
Dr. Zogby, the people who are defecting from the Democratic Party are fighting too. And I have to be really clear about that, because, you know, I think that people progressives who are allies often don't hear the ways in which they are they come off as very antagonistic to people who have much deeper interests in the success of a progressive movement than those of us who are relatively comfortable in life. And they're frustrated that all of the interlocutors who speak for the left expect them to keep lining up and doing the same thing when they're the ones that are offering up significant portions of their paycheck and significant portions of their time and effort to keep this corrupt institution going. And it's hard for them to see when they are the ones that are subsisting at a minimum wage that hasn't been raised since George Bush was president. They're being told about these incremental changes that will magically transform their lives and create this parade of horribles from coming down the pike, when they're experiencing a level of parade of horrible that those of us in the chattering class simply aren't subjected to. And so I'm not going to sit here and pretend that Hillary and Donald Trump are the same, or that Biden and Donald Trump are the same. But what I also won't do is pretend that Joe Biden in the Clinton era didn't oversee the worst cuts to the social safety net that far outstripped what Republicans could ever hope and dream of doing. Actually, because they were Democrats and they don't come under the same level of scrutiny as the Donald Trumps in office. Democrats can build border walls, as they have advocated for to do and have done, or continuing to do. Joe Biden is continuing to do. They can keep kids in cages. They can start and provoke wars, all of which has been going on, regardless of who, a D or an R, is in office. The difference to many seems to be the level of public outrage about it, wherein when a Democrat does it, everyone sits back and doesn't even care. And so, again, I'm not trying to conflate and say that these things are the same. But the question isn't whether or not people are ignorant about the harms that can come with a Republican candidate. The question people are asking is, and it's very risky to say, it's very stigmatizing to say, and no one's willing to say it. I don't think I've ever said it as clearly as this on the podcast. But the question that people are asking themselves is it worth it to have a dirty break, even if it means that candidate doesn't win, but sows the seeds for a third party that has the possibility of winning within the next 10 or 20 years? And if that is worth it, given that the likelihood of DNC reform, which you're here to speak to, seems unlikely to happen within that time span.
More likely than the other. More likely than the other. And let's deal with another thing, Briahna, and that is that the incremental changes you make, they're real. They're real, and they're good. I will never forget the debate that took place over the first criminal justice reform bill that was put forward back more than a decade ago. And there was a whole debate on the left about it didn't do enough, it didn't go far enough, it didn't do this, didn't do that. The fact is there weren't the votes there to pass it. But what they got through made a difference. And so there was a meeting that took place around the bill with the senators who pushed it and were pushing it. And woman from the ACLU said, after hearing all the people griping about it, she said, look, this is the best that could be done right now, and give them a break. This Christmas, 30,000 mothers are going to have their sons home with them because of this bill. It's not the 3 million you want, the 300,000 you want, but it's 30,000. If that's what we could get right now, are you going to deny those mothers, those 30,000, to die on your principle? And she won the day in that argument. I think it was important to hear. If I had my ideal legislation that I'd put forward, man, it would be very different than what's passing right now. But the bill that just got passed through Congress, I mean, yeah, I know Joe Manchin held it up. I mean, goddamn what he is able to do, sitting on that little perch of his playing.
There's nothing he's able to do that Bernie Sanders isn't able to do.
But Bernie has pushed, and there are things in that bill that are good that we cannot deny. And let us, if the reality is, when I keep hearing things, well, we got to get the filibuster. If you haven't got the 50 votes to pass a bill, then how are you going to get the 60 votes in order to close debate and end the filibuster? We just don't have the vote. I mean, the problem right now, and here the problem goes back to the DSCC, right? They wasted money in previous elections supporting candidates that they shouldn't have been supporting, and not supporting candidates that might have won. And the entire Democratic Party strategy that writes off the white working class is stupid and is killing us. And that, by the way, the other resolution that got silenced and didn't get a vote in the in this last meeting was my resolution calling for outreach to ethnic white voters in Pennsylvania and Ohio in particular, because I want to win the Fetterman race and the Tim Ryan race, and I think we can do it. And it makes a difference if we flip those 2 seats and get 2 more Democrats, so that at least we're secure in the 50 votes we need to move forward. It makes a difference. And it's not perfect, but don't make the perfect the enemy of the good. I mean, the fact is that it's not, look, I've been having this fight for a long time, and I know, and the party wearies me, and I've paid a price for it, and they've embarrassed me, and it's been difficult, but I think that it is a fight worth having. I'm not walking away from it. I understand what you're saying about people wanting to do a third party. There's not a snowball chance in hell that that's going to happen anytime soon. And even if it does happen, the path that I'm on, I believe that the path I'm on is a shorter one to produce the changes I want than trying to replace the system we've got with a third party that will never build the infrastructure in a way to compete with what we've got. I think we can change the Democratic
Dr.
Party,
Zogby,
and I see it changing every day.
With all due respect,
mm-hmm.
I know that you just said you see it changing every day. The reason that you wrote your article today and are here today is because of the ways that it is absolutely not changing. And with all due respect, you have told really meaningful analogies and given really meaningful examples from an election that happened when I was 3 years old, and as I'm about to turn 40. You know what I mean? Showing the exact same kind of response from the Democratic Party to progressive candidates back when it was Jesse Jackson, and now when it's Bernie Sanders, and after that, all of these other progressive candidates. And so I had this conversation with Crystal Ball on the show a couple of weeks ago. I am not naive, and I don't think any of the other progressives that are hoping for a dirty break are naive about the challenges that presents. But it strikes us, I think, as incredible that someone who has been in the thick of how hard it is and fought for as long as you have been fighting and have had a front row seat to how intractable the Democratic Party can be, to say, 35 years into that struggle, that you still think that is an avenue that should be exclusively pursued. Again, this isn't to say no one should ever run for office as a Democrat again, ever, but that there is a group of people who is willing to support an alternative approach. Why it is that seems to be a conversation that folks are completely unwilling to have. So I would ask you, completely taking that you do not advocate this strategy, I'm curious still, with your knowledge of as an insider and how the DNC works, what you think would happen, what the mechanism would be, how it would play out if someone in the position that Bernie was in 2016 or 2020 opted to run as a third-party candidate at the point at which it became clear that the Democratic Party wasn't treating it fairly. Perhaps 2016 is a better example because we did have that kind of more explicit party maneuver to try to derail his campaign.
Mm-hmm. It would have fractured what is a fragile coalition. It would have made even the victories that we've won more difficult. And there would have been a consequence in terms of the legislation that was possible, even though it was not, as I said, perfect. It would have been impossible to do it. And it would have damaged Bernie as well. Bernie is today chairman of the committee. He would not be chairman of the committee. He's able to do some things being where he is that no one else can do but Bernie, because he is where he is. And I wouldn't want Bernie to have been a martyr when I need him to be in the fight. So yeah,
what kinds of things? Can you help us understand what kinds of things he's able to do as chair of the committee?
He's in the room when debates take place, and he's pushed on, as Manchin was pushing one way, Bernie was pushing the other way. And what's good in that bill is what Bernie was fighting for to be in that bill. Talk to Warren Gunnels about that. Warren will tell you what changes Bernie makes.
I've reached out to him to talk about this, and I think that there's various reasons that this might not be the best forum for him.
I follow him on Twitter, and I see the stuff that Bernie's doing every day, and it makes a difference. I
think the frustration that folks have is that there's this presumption that people who are looking for an alternative path are somehow arguing that absolutely nothing good comes out of the compromise position. But of course, that's not what incrementalism means. What incrementalism means isn't that no change happens. It's just that change happens at a slow enough crawl that, frankly, leaves a lot of people out and sentences entire generations of people to a substandard way of life, as second-class citizens ground under the heel of American capitalism. The alternative, what I think that the progressives who want an alternative path are very clear-eyed about what gains that they could be potentially foregoing, and for their plan and their plan may not work out at all. What I don't hear acknowledged is what might be gained by taking the kinds of risks. And I think it would be a lot more credible for folks who are opting for vote blue no matter who in incrementalism if they honestly reckoned with the possibility of what kind of infrastructure could be instigated by a third-party challenge, which allows all of the people who are overwhelmingly disaffected. Overwhelming majorities of Americans are unhappy with government right now across the political divide. I would argue that Trump winning is evidence of how people across the ideological spectrum are very frustrated with both parties. The Bernie movement and the Trump movement, I think, tapped into very similar sentiments.
Of course. Absolutely. And I completely agree with you. But Briahna, look, what would have happened if Bernie ran is Donald Trump would be president for a second term.
Well, let's talk about 2016, because here's the other issue. Donald Trump won in 2016, whether or not Bernie did a dirty break. And of course, we can't go back in time, and we wouldn't have known that Donald Trump was going to win regardless of what Bernie did. But it does seem to be a better framework to look at this in, because it takes out the responsibility, frankly, that is put on progressives and people who want a better world for the electoral outcome that corporate Democrats created. Corporate Democrats made Donald Trump president in 2016. Corporate Democrats Pied Pipered him into the lead seat. Corporate media, Democratic left corporate media, liberal corporate media, is the one that covered him nonstop and showed empty podiums when Bernie Sanders was trying to announce his campaign. Mm-hmm. So if corporate media is doing all that and creating Donald Trump, what is the left's role in creating the kind of future it wants to see?
Look, there are left things that I appreciate, like the Working Families Party and Justice Democrats and DSA. I mean, I think they make a huge contribution in terms of this fight, but they don't make the break. They are fighting the outside-inside game, and I appreciate that. And it's brought some pretty amazing people into the political arena. And we've we're beneficiaries for that. That's where some of the progressives who are in Congress today come from. That's the support base that they
to
have.
what effect, Dr. Zogby? Because even some of the people who founded Justice Democrats, like Kyle Kulinski, have expressed explicit disappointment that they are not running the kind of strategy as insiders as he hoped when he founded the organization. He hoped that they would be openly adversarial to the Democratic Party. He hoped that they would do things like stand up for Senator Turner and the other progressives when they're getting railroaded by their own party. You know,
And they should be doing that.
And when they're not, when they don't, when you get into a
That's a
position where
problem
they're
within the organization itself, that they should be doing it. They should be doing it.
So this is the argument. If the organization itself is so corrupting that even, let's say, good people who were elected for the right reasons get in there and don't do the things for which they're elected, the things they're elected to do, what is the point of continuing to invest in that system that has demonstrated its ability to corrupt even the best fighters we've ever had?
Well, I mean, look, Rashida's there, and I think she's made an enormous difference just by being there. Ilhan is there, same thing. AOC, same thing. Cori Bush, same thing. I think, we've got people who've made a huge contribution, even in a limited way that one or two or three or four voices can make, simply by being there.
But Dr. Zogby, how concretely? You're someone who's advocated for so long for the rights of the Palestinian people, and you've seen them vote for the Iron Dome funding, and you've seen them not take a stand on these kinds of issues, right?
So what do I do? What do I do? Call for a third party that will do nothing? I mean, look, what we've got here is we've got, for the first time in the years that I've been doing this, that we've been building this, the only time I recall we've ever had a debate on Palestine was the one that I was able to lead under Jesse Jackson in '88 at the convention. And I got the crap kicked out of me for doing that. I mean, I was
horrible, Dr.
almost
Zogby.
Ostracized for that. But today, we have resolutions in Congress, letters coming from members of Congress that get 50, 60, 70, 80 signatures. That's not enough, but it's a hell of a lot better than it was when I was starting with this, when we had 7 or 8. And the 7 or 8 used to get the crap kicked out of them and ultimately became silenced. I mean, Tom Harkin was a champion. They beat him up. He turned into an absolute pro-Israel advocate. That doesn't happen. That doesn't happen anymore. We've got more voices speaking today. Look,
you see those votes and you don't see that as a corrupting influence.
Of course I do. Of course I do. This has been my life. It's been my life. For 40 years, I've been fighting this fight. Don't tell me. I mean, it hurts. Isn't that what I want? You asked me when I started in this thing, when I was in my 20s or 30s, did I expect to still be fighting the same fights today that I was fighting then? I said, I've been fighting with the Catholic Church to reform. I've been fighting the Democratic Party. I've been fighting Israel-Palestine. I feel like Sisyphus sometimes. I'm just rolling the stone up the hill and it's going to roll back down. But when the damn stone is at the bottom of the hill, I can't walk away from it. My job is to continue to try to roll, even though I know it may not succeed. I do not believe that walking away from the fight within the party, for me, maybe for others it's different, but I think there are consequences to walking away that people have to consider. If we had every one of us committed to understanding the rules about the way the party plays its game, learn to manipulate those rules and move forward, we'd be in a better position. We got done in this time. We're not going to get done in next time. There will be a debate on dark money the next time because we know now how the game is played. We will get those horses in a row or ducks in a row or whatever the term is, and we're going to fight this one. I'm not giving it up. Just like when Shireen Abu Akleh was killed, didn't give up. What we did was we got 60 members of Congress on a letter. Never got that many before. And it's still not accountability, and we're not giving up for that either. I mean, it is fundamentally wrong the way our country deals with these issues and the way our party deals with these issues. And I get tired, but tired isn't an option. Fighting is. And so we just continue to do the fight because that's what we have to do. I cannot walk away. I don't encourage other people to walk away. When you get frustrated, it's because you have a right to be frustrated and right to be angry with these people. But at the same time, better than being tired and frustrated is to sit down and think of a strategy to get around the frustration and develop a strategic vision, and a strategic vision of that includes the implement steps of how do I go from where I want to be to where I am. I now know, and I think those of us in our progressive caucus in the Democratic Party know what we have to do between now and the winter meeting to move just this one little issue forward. We're going to do it. We're going to go from 35 to 100. May not pass, but we will not be silenced the next time out. There will not be another race like the Nina Turner race, like the Summer Lee race, like the Andy Levin race. It will not be. We will get our ducks in a row and we will fight this fight. And we need every hand on deck to do it. That's what we do. It ain't easy. It ain't pretty, but it's the only game we got.
Well, look, I certainly, I empathize deeply, and, I empathize isn't the right word because I obviously haven't fought as hard or as long by many orders of magnitude as you have, but I sympathize perhaps very deeply with what you've had to go through. And the analogy of Sisyphus, I think, is really apropos, because I think what some people are saying is not to give up again in the least, but instead of pushing up again and again, to consider whether or not there's a different path around the proverbial mountain. And while I do think a two-pronged approach is very legitimate, and I am really grateful for those of you who are continuing to fight within the DNC and who are able to inform us, as you've done, about the ways in which it continues to ally itself, against the interests of progressives, and I would argue working people across the political spectrum in the United States of America. I do also really appreciate those who are charting, in your words, an alternative path, an alternative strategic path that looks to other avenues that haven't been tried, as other people continue to make inroads on the inside. So thank you so much, Dr. Zogby, for spending so much time with me here today, walking us through what's going on in the DNC.
Thank you. Well, I'll tell you what, I got my third booster shot yesterday.
Yeah.
And I was pretty much sleeping and aching and just fatigued. This got my juices flowing. So thank you. Thank you for that.
Well, I'm happy to oblige. Can you tell people where to find more of you and your work and your article in The Nation today?
Well, they can follow me on Twitter at JJZ1600, JJZ1600. And my website's jameszogby.com. And the institute that I founded is aaiusa.org, aaiusa.org. But yeah, if they want to follow me on Twitter, they also catch my politics, but also the flowers in my neighborhood, because I just love taking pictures of nature. And I'll tell you what the CDC ought to do is say, if you get the booster shot and you're feeling fatigued, do a radio show with Briahna. It'll get your juices flowing. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much. And listeners, this is a free episode, but if you want an additional episode of Bad Faith Podcast every week on Mondays, you can subscribe at patreon.com/badfaithpodcast for $5 a month. You help support these kinds of conversations in independent media more broadly, the likes of which will continue to press on issues that matter instead of using their resources to derail progressive candidacies like Bernie Sanders. Thanks as always for listening, and keep the faith. Hey YouTube, thanks for watching. Just a reminder that this is a podcast. You can catch an extra premium episode every Monday for $5 a month at patreon.com/badfaithpodcast. That's patreon.com/badfaithpodcast for $5 a month, an extra episode every week. Additionally, please do consider liking this video, subscribing to this channel. It helps us out. It helps independent media beat the algorithm. We appreciate you. And as always, keep the faith.